If you were somebody who had any questions about what Joe Biden was doing to your country, you may have been labeled a domestic violent extremist. I promise to root out and expose the politicization of intelligence. Remember, it's like LGBTQ plus I expialidocious. It's like they can't help themselves. Yeah, right. Political activism, use of strong rhetoric, generalized philosophic embrace of violent tactics may not constitute violent extremism and are constitutionally protected. Yeah, right. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, declassified these materials. We'll take a look at them. But if you were somebody who had any questions about what Joe Biden was doing to your country, you may have been labeled a domestic violent extremist. I know we got, after January 6th, labeled harmful and dangerous and all sorts of other things for our misinformation, which all turned out to be true. But now we get the documents that were behind that onslaught. And the question is, will anybody be held accountable for it? Or are we just going to read documents here? So here is what Tulsi Gabbard posted for us. It says, look, as the Director of National Intelligence, I promise to root out and expose the politicization of intelligence. And so I recently declassified 2 reports that show how Biden and his administration labeled Americans who disagree with their policies as domestic violent extremists, DVEs, homegrown DVEs, racially motivated DVEs, and the list went on, saying it was followed by FBI investigations, surveillance, and government-directed social media censorship on all of us. This is the classic ploy to politicize intelligence and the national security state against the American people, undermining our constitutionally guaranteed rights and freedoms. And so this is what Joe Biden was saying. Look at this. December 13th, 2021, right in the throes of the post-insurrection January 6th, right in the throes of the COVID pandemic. And here's what they're talking about here. Authored by NCTC, Homeland, and the FBI, coordinated with redacted. Why can't they tell us who they coordinated with? It's the NCTC current. It says, all of these Democrat weaponized entities, FBI, Homeland, we assess that there are some DVEs, domestic violent extremists, and their foreign analogs will threaten violence in opposition to COVID-19 mandates. Remember when they were going to say, it's going to be a winter of misery and death if you don't take this pharmaceutical. And if you question us, you're killing grandma. Remember that? In 2020, DVEs threatened or plotted violence against the healthcare sector. It's funny now because their side's shooting CEOs in the back. Since the advent of the jabs, DVEs have expanded their potential target set to include government officials, healthcare workers, or others who are working on the vaccination efforts. We anticipate the threat will continue at least into the winter, as many of the new mandates are now being imposed across the country. Remember these sick freaks? In United States, we have observed that at least a handful of identified anti-government or anti-authority violent extremists. Remember, we were making so much fun of them because they had all the different letters in their extremist names. Remember, it's like LGBTQ plus I expialidocious. It's like they can't help themselves. They have DVEs, then they have anti-authority violent extremists, anti-government or AGAAVEs. Then they got the militia violent extremists, the MVEs, and then the RMVEs for the racially. It's like totally nuts. Since August, some of these MVEs have called for violence against medical whatever, and they employ, oh wow. Some DVEs employ a number of techniques, let's say, some of which may be criminal, whereas others just may constitute the exercise of rights protected by the Constitution. Yeah, I forgot about that. It says U.S. persons linking, citing, quoting, or voicing the same narratives raised by these DVEs are likely engaging in First Amendment protected activities, unless they're acting in concert with the threat actor. Furthermore, yeah, right. I mean, we were being censored. We didn't say anything violent. We never saying anything about violent ever anywhere. Have always disavowed that uniformly, even much to our chagrin. Like, okay, maybe, you know, it's just the good blanket rule. We still got censored. We got canceled, and we were in it like the light end of the abuse of a tyrannical government, right? Not like, oh, woe is us here. There are other people who got thrown in solitary confinement for posting memes and stuff like that. Like, it was insane times we were living through. And some of it was First Amendment protected activity. You mean like posting memes, perhaps? That could have been one. But they didn't. They targeted these people. They went after the J6ers. They raided homes. They called people showing up at school boards terroristic parents and stuff like that. And this was just the outgrowth of their weaponization of the entire apparatus. The mere advocacy of political or social positions, yeah, right, political activism, use of strong rhetoric, generalized philosophic embrace of violent tactics may not constitute violent extremism and are constitutionally protected. Yeah, right. Thank you for that little footnote. We know how this happened in practice. And if they couldn't arrest you for it and investigate you under this memo, well, then they just demonetized you, or they threw you off the internet, or they went after your law license. Or if you're a medical doctor talking about this, they would try to cancel your medical licenses so that you were just now totally defeated unless you succumb to their will. Diverse socio-political factors that are amplifying this threat. All right, let's see here. An overlapping set of social-political grievances that are spurred by the DVEs could be plotting attacks. Here's things that you might be mad about. Anger at responses to the pandemic, which was the worst response in the world, I think is now pretty conclusive. I think our CDC is saying that now. No, it's like the worst in the world. Our health expectancies went down. We had more deaths than anyone else. And it was a disaster. Thank you, government. They promised us they had everything figured out. They didn't because they're morons. Adherents of several DVE ideologies continued coverage around anger at immigration. They also invaded us with 15 million people at least during those 4 years. And perceived election fraud, which was actually fraudulent, as we talked about ad nauseum here. Evolving conspiracy theories, which were all true, thus increasing the likelihood of violent messaging. They say that they're doing a bunch of investigations. These are motivated by perceptions and fraud, right? We were on the receiving end of a lot of that. Saying that New York-based militia violent extremist groups were also arrested. Obviously, the Capitol siege is in there, so-called. Key disruptions. Somebody put a bomb at the Democratic Party, some other Texas group, whatever. And so this was their pretext to come after every single person who contested the government's lies. Tulsi Gabbard was talking about this over with Will Cain. Here's what she said.
That's exactly the point, and this is where some former FBI agents have actually come out who were serving in the FBI during this period of time and pointed out exactly that fact, that this line of continuum that they have created here that places a level of suspicion on people. Ultimately, again, the through line here are people who oppose President Biden administration's policies should be seen with some form of suspicion as a potential domestic terror threat. You've talked a lot about, you spoke with Senator Rand Paul about the Quiet Skies program, the secret domestic terror watch list program. Yes. Something that the Biden administration placed me on the very day after I spoke out against Vice President Kamala Harris's policies and warned about the potential of the threat that she would pose if she were elected and served as commander-in-chief. So there are many different examples here that go towards exactly what you're talking about, that by laying this groundwork, they are then giving excuse and license to the FBI and other federal agencies to then surveil or carefully watch Americans who oppose the Biden administration's policies.
All right, so Tulsi Gabbard, it's really pretty surreal in a way that she was on the no-fly list as a threat to America, and now she's running the office of the Director of National Intelligence. And it's not like she stole that position. Everybody went to the polls and voted. We saw what they were doing when they were in charge. We were disgusted by it, more so than the other side, and we won the elections uniformly. So now she can come in and correct the record. And so for all the faults of the American system, you might say, well, at least there is that possibility, right? That these maniacs can be in charge. They can exercise every single lever of power to try to stop the opposition party from rising, and they still lose, right? That's a pretty nice feature that we have here. Now, Bongino said that we're also talking about a new COVID strain. Oh no! Says, as we read and process reports of a new COVID strain emerging, says Dan, I want you to know we are actively investigating in multiple field offices the cover-up of the origin of the COVID virus, along with associated matters requiring our attention. You deserve answers. Yes, we do. Thank you for that, Dan. All right, so we got that coming up. And then we also had Comer saying, while all this was happening, while we were being attacked by the Biden administration, in truth, Biden didn't know what the heck was going on. And Comer is investigating this. Who was really running the FBI? Who was really targeting all these people? Was it Bernal, Jill Biden's chief of staff? Was it Elizabeth Warren? Who was it? We want to know.
The four staffers aren't well-known staffers. These four staffers operated behind the scenes. But while we're starting with them, Sean, we believe these are the staffers that were responsible for using the auto pen. Someone got documents and manually placed them in the machine and pressed the power button to sign Joe Biden's signature. That was not Joe Biden. That was done by staffers. That would be done by any staffer. So we believe and have good reason to believe these are the four staffers that were responsible for that. We want to ask them, who gave you the authority to use Joe Biden's signature? And we'll go from there. Obviously, obviously, we believe that some of the names like Chief of Staff and perhaps the First Lady were involved in a lot of the decision making. If that's where the trail leads, then we'll bring them in as well. But we're going to get answers to all the questions that every American deserves answers to. But again, we're going to see where the trail leads. We followed the money. We found the shell companies. We found the bank accounts. We're going to do the same thing with this auto pen. Who was giving the authority for use of the auto pen? Remember, Sean, there was more activity in the last 100 days of the Biden administration than the first 3.5 years of the Biden administration. Many of the far-reaching executive orders were signed during the last 100 days, and they were all signed by the auto pen. We don't believe that you can sign a legal document with an auto pen. If I issue a subpoena, I have to fly to Washington, D.C. to manually sign my signature on that subpoena. Anything pertaining to the law has to be signed by a person. We know the auto pen was used. What I can tell you tonight is the 4 staffers that we've asked to come in for transcribed interviews, they have all lawyered up. They are taking this very seriously, and this is going to be a battle to get to the truth.
Well, I hope they stay on it. Thank you, James, for doing it. We've got some power now. Get those subpoenas out. Pam Bondi can prosecute them just like they did for Navarro, just like they did for Bannon. And as we recall, congressional subpoenas from even a fake committee like January 6th committee are valid, and they have to be honored or else you go to jail. So we're looking forward to seeing what comes from that. Thank you to James Comer for digging in.